The winter wind was cold that morning, and the streets were busy with people rushing to work. In the middle of the crowd, a man walked slowly. Wearing an old brown coat, faded jeans, and shoes with worn-out soles, his hands were in his pockets. His face partly hidden under a simple cap to anyone passing by. He looked like just another poor man, maybe even homeless, but in reality, he was the owner of the largest retail store in the city, a millionaire who could buy almost anything he wanted. His name was Mr. Anthony Cole, but today, nobody would recognize him. He had a reason for hiding his identity. For months, he had been receiving strange reports from a few customers' whispers of a manager in his store mistreating staff. Anthony wanted to see the truth with his own eyes, not through the reports of others. So he left his expensive suit at home, put on old clothes, and decided to walk into his own store as an ordinary customer. No one at the store knew he was coming. That was exactly how he wanted it when Anthony stepped through the glass doors. A wave of warm air met his face. The store looked bright and busy. With shelves full of neatly arranged goods, he picked up a small basket and started walking down the aisles, pretending to shop. His eyes scanned the place, every corner, every staff member, every detail. He had run this business for years. But today, he was looking for something specific, something wrong. It didn't take long. From across the store, Anthony heard a sharp, angry voice. "Move faster. You're wasting time again." The words cut through the air like a knife. Customers turned their heads, curious and uncomfortable. Anthony followed the voice until he reached the checkout counters. There, behind one of the registers, stood a young black woman in a neat uniform. Her name tag read Maria. She was scanning items carefully for an elderly customer, but her hands were shaking. Standing over her was a tall man in a pressed suit, the store's manager, Mr. Brent. His face was twisted in anger, his tone loud enough for everyone to hear. "What's wrong with you today? Are you always this slow? Or is it just for my store?" The manager barked. Maria's lips trembled, but she didn't look up. "I'm doing my best, sir," she said softly. "Your best. Your best is not enough. We don't need lazy people here." The manager shouted again. A mother standing in line with her child looked away, clearly uncomfortable. A man waiting behind her muttered under his breath, but no one said anything out loud. Anthony watched carefully. Maria's counter was perfectly clean, her scanning quick and precise. She wasn't slow at all. If anything, she was doing her job better than most. Yet, the manager's eyes were filled with dislike, almost as if he wanted to break her spirit. Anthony's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to stay quiet. He wanted to see just how far this man would go. Maria handed the elderly customer their receipt with a polite smile as soon as they left. The manager leaned closer and whispered something in her ear, something that made her shoulders drop. Anthony couldn't hear the words, but he could see the effect. Maria's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Still, she kept working, scanning the next customer's items. Her professionalism was impressive, but Anthony could feel the tension. In her body, the line moved slowly, and Anthony used the time to look around. He noticed the other employees. Some glanced at Maria with sympathy, but quickly looked away when the manager turned his head. It was clear this wasn't the first time she had been treated like this. It was also clear that no one dared to interfere. Anthony decided to test the situation. He picked a few random items, bread, milk, and some fruit, and joined Maria's line. When it was his turn, she greeted him with the same polite tone she had used for every customer. "Good morning, sir," she said quietly. Scanning his items, Anthony smiled at her. But before he could reply, the manager suddenly appeared again. "Maria, you're still too slow. We can't afford to waste time on customers like this," he said, pointing at Anthony as if he was nothing. Anthony felt a fire burn in his chest, but he kept his face calm. "Sir, I'm doing my job as quickly as I can, Maria said, her voice firmer this time. Don't talk back to me. The manager snapped. Several customers nearby were now openly watching, their eyes darting between the manager and the cashier. Anthony paid for his items and left the counter without revealing who he was. But inside, his mind was already working. He had seen enough for now. He knew exactly what he was going to do next. As he walked toward the back of the store, Anthony's eyes stayed on Maria. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change, and the man in old clothes was going to make sure of it. The store grew busier as the morning passed. More customers filled the aisles, and the lines at the checkout counters grew longer. Anthony kept himself hidden among the shoppers, still carrying the small basket from earlier. He moved slowly, pretending to browse, but his eyes stayed fixed on Maria. Every few minutes, the store manager, Brent, returned to her station like a shadow, and every time his voice carried the same sharp tone. Faster, Maria. You're holding up the whole line. He barked. Maria's hands moved quickly, scanning items, pressing buttons, handing back change. She didn't make a single mistake, but Brent wasn't watching her work. He was watching her face, almost as if he enjoyed seeing her under pressure. The customers in her line started noticing. Some looked annoyed at the manager's interruptions. One woman muttered, "She's doing fine. Leave her alone," under her breath. But Brent didn't seem to hear or didn't care. Then came a moment that made Anthony's blood boil. An elderly man at the counter smiled at Maria, handing her a few coins as she reached out to take them. One slipped from his hand and rolled onto the floor. Maria quickly bent down to pick it up. Before she could stand, Brent's voice exploded across the store. "What are you doing down there? This isn't a playground. You're wasting everyone's time." The old man looked shocked, mumbling, "It was my fault." But Brent ignored him. All eyes turned to Maria, still crouched on the floor, her cheeks burning red. She rose silently, handed the change to the customer, and forced a small smile. But Anthony could see the tears building in her eyes. She swallowed them down and kept going. The humiliation was plain for everyone to see. Anthony wanted to step forward right then, to tell Brent exactly who he was and what would happen next. But he stopped himself. Not yet, he thought. The lesson would be stronger if the man buried himself deeper first. A few minutes later, Brent returned, holding a clipboard. "Maria, you'll skip your break today. We can't afford to have you sitting around," he said loudly. "But sir, I've been on the register since the store opened," she started. "I don't care." He cut her off. "If you can't handle it, maybe you should go find a job where you can sit all day." Gasps came from a couple of customers nearby. Anthony noticed a mother gently cover her child's ears, as if the words were too cruel to hear. Maria nodded, pressing her lips together, and kept working, her posture straight, her movements precise. But Anthony could see the strain in her shoulders. Every insult hit her like a small weight, and yet she didn't throw the weight back. She carried it silently. A young male employee walked past and glanced at her. There was pity in his eyes, but when Brent's gaze turned toward him, he quickly looked away and hurried off. It was obvious the whole staff feared him. Anthony drifted closer, picking up a magazine and pretending to read. From here, he could hear everything. Maria greeted each customer with warmth. "Good morning. How are you today? Would you like a bag for that? Thank you for shopping with us." Her voice never cracked, even though he could see the pain beneath it. Then Brent did something that sealed his fate. A young girl, no more than 10 years old, placed a small chocolate bar on the counter. Maria smiled and scanned it. Before the girl could hand over her money, Brent stepped in. "Maria, that's the wrong price. You're charging less than you should." Maria glanced at the screen. "No, sir. It's the price on the label," she explained gently. Brent leaned in so close that even the little girl stepped back. Are you telling me I'm wrong?" He snarled. Maria's eyes dropped. "No, sir," she whispered, changing the price to what he demanded, even though it was more than the label said. The girl's mother frowned, but paid anyway. As they walked away, the mother muttered, "That's not right." Anthony felt his patience breaking. This wasn't just bad management, this was cruelty. And it was happening in his store, under his name, by now. Several customers had noticed the tension. Some were whispering, some shaking their heads. Maria kept her head down. She didn't fight back. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she was too. Afraid of losing her job, Anthony walked to the end of the aisle and took a deep breath. He had seen enough to understand everything. The pattern was clear. Brent targeted Maria again and again. Not because she was bad at her job, but because he thought no one would protect her. And that was about to change. The man in old clothes was no longer just watching. He was planning. His move, the public humiliation, had gone far enough. Soon, everyone in this store would know exactly who Anthony Cole was, and Brent would regret every word he had spoken today. By midday, the store was packed. Children ran through the aisles with their parents calling after them. Shopping carts squeaked, and the sound of beeping scanners filled the air. Maria's register never stopped. Her hands moved like clockwork, scanning, bagging, giving change, and thanking customers. But Anthony could see her energy fading. Her back was straight, but her eyes looked tired. She had been standing for hours without a break. Brent, on the other hand, moved around like a king inspecting his territory. His shoes clicked against the floor. And every time he passed Maria's counter, his eyes narrowed. Anthony stayed close enough to hear, but far enough to avoid drawing attention. He wanted to see the exact moment when Brent crossed the final line. It came sooner than he expected. A small boy in the line clutched a pack of cookies, his mother searching for her wallet. Maria smiled warmly at the boy. "That's your favorite, isn't it?" she asked. The boy nodded shyly. Before she could scan the item, Brent swooped in. "Maria? Stop wasting time talking to customers," he barked. "It was just a second, sir." She tried to explain. "A second too long." He snapped, turning to the mother. "Some people don't understand. This is a business, not a social club." The mother's eyebrows rose in disbelief. She grabbed her son's hand and muttered, "Rude," under her breath. But again, Brent acted as if he didn't hear. Anthony could see the way Maria's cheeks flushed. She lowered her head and kept scanning, but the humiliation was building inside her like a storm. Then came the final push. A delivery driver walked in with a heavy box for the store. Brent called out, "Maria, go help with that box in the back." She glanced at her line of customers. "Sir, I can't leave the register unattended." "I said now." Brent interrupted. The other cashiers were busy with their own customers. Maria looked torn. If she left, people would be waiting with no one to serve them. But if she stayed, Brent would be furious. I'll go," she said quietly. She stepped away from the register, heading toward the storage room. But as she passed Brent, he leaned in and muttered something low. Anthony couldn't hear the words, but he saw the way Maria's shoulders stiffened. It was like she had been hit by something invisible. Anthony's hands clenched inside his coat pockets. He followed her at a distance. When she entered the back room, the delivery driver was already unloading the box. It was huge and heavy. Far too heavy for one person, especially someone her size. Still, Maria bent down. Gripping the sides and trying to lift it, her arms trembled under the weight. Her breath quickening, Brent stood in the doorway. Arms crossed. "Come on, Maria. Don't tell me you can't carry that," he said with a mocking smile. Anthony stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "She shouldn't be lifting that alone." Brent turned sharply, glaring at him. "Mind your own business, old man." "She works here. She can handle it." Anthony said nothing. Watching closely, Maria struggled. Managing to push the box a few inches before it slipped from her grip, it landed with a dull thud, and she winced in pain. Holding her wrist, Anthony took a step toward her. "You're hurt," he said softly. Maria shook her head quickly. "I'm fine," she whispered, but her voice betrayed her. Brent stepped forward, his tone dripping with disdain. "If you can't handle simple tasks, Maria, maybe you should quit. We don't need weak people here." The words hung in the air. Even the delivery driver paused, looking uncomfortable. That was it. The breaking point. Anthony felt a cold wave of anger wash over him. He had seen enough, heard enough. Brent had not only humiliated her in front of customers, but now he was pushing her toward physical harm. Anthony's decision was made. The time for silent observation was over. Maria quietly returned to her register, cradling her wrist but still working. Customers gave her sympathetic smiles, but no one dared to speak up. Anthony stood near the end of her line. Pretending to wait, inside, his mind was already planning his next move. The store lights reflected off the polished floor as Brent strutted past. Anthony's eyes followed him like a hawk. The man in old clothes wasn't going to stay silent much longer. Brent thought he was untouchable. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. And Maria, the girl who had been treated like nothing all morning, was about to find out that someone was finally on her side. The afternoon sun streamed through the store's large front windows, casting long, golden beams across the tiled floor. But for Maria, the warmth of that light felt far away. She stood at her register, scanning item after item, her injured wrist throbbing beneath the weight of every movement. She didn't complain, didn't even slow down. If she showed weakness, she knew Brent would pounce on it. Anthony lingered near a display of canned goods, pretending to compare labels while keeping her in sight. From this angle, he could see her face more clearly. Her smile was still there, small, polite, practiced, but it didn't reach her eyes. Every time Brent passed by, her shoulders tensed, her breathing shifted. It was the silent language of someone who had learned to survive by making themselves smaller. A mother with 2 children approached her register. Maria greeted them warmly, even managing a little laugh when the younger child giggled at the beeping sound of the scanner. But when the customers left and the line was empty for a brief moment, Maria's expression changed. She let out a slow breath and blinked rapidly. Anthony caught it, the shimmer of tears, before she quickly wiped them away with the back of her hand. She thought no one had noticed. Brent's voice cut through the moment. "Maria, stop standing around. There are shelves too tidy when no one's in your line." Anthony turned his head slightly, watching. Maria didn't argue, didn't even sigh. She simply nodded and began stacking candy bars neatly near the counter. Her hands moved automatically, but Anthony could see her jaw tighten. As she worked, 2 other employees walked past. Whispering to each other, one glanced at Maria with sympathy. The other quickly shook their head. It was the kind of silent warning that said, "Don't get involved." Anthony understood it. Brent ruled through fear, and everyone knew it. A customer in line dropped a receipt on the floor. Maria bent down to pick it up when she rose. Anthony saw the faint redness around her eyes. She had been holding back tears for hours now. Silent tears, swallowed pain. Hidden behind a mask of professionalism, Anthony's mind wandered briefly. How many times had this happened? How many days had she gone home exhausted? Not from the work itself, but from the constant weight of humiliation. He thought about the reports he had received in his office. Short, vague complaints about management issues. Now he knew the truth. Those reports were just the tip of something much uglier. A little later, an older woman came to the counter, her hands trembling as she placed a few groceries down. Maria's voice softened. "Take your time." "Ma'am, no rush." She helped bag the items and even carried one small bag around the counter for the woman. The customer thanked her warmly and pressed a small candy into her hand. Maria smiled, her eyes lighting up for just a second. But before she could put the candy away, Brent appeared again. "Maria, personal items don't belong at the register," he snapped. It was a gift. "From a customer, sir," she explained quietly. Brent smirked. "Eat it later." "You're here to work, not collect presents." He walked away, leaving the candy sitting like a forbidden object on the counter. Maria slipped it into her pocket without a word. Anthony's fists tightened inside his coat. He was struggling now. To keep his plan in place, every part of him wanted to step in, to tell her she didn't deserve any of this. But he knew the moment would be more powerful if it came at the right time. The hours crawled by. Maria's movements became slower, not from laziness, but from sheer exhaustion. Still, she didn't complain. Even when customers grew impatient, she kept her voice calm. Anthony noticed how some people smiled at her. Out of respect, they could see she was doing her best under pressure. As evening approached, the store began to quiet. Maria's line finally cleared, giving her a brief moment to rest her aching wrist. She leaned slightly on the counter, her eyes distant. Anthony took a step closer. Close enough to see her lips move in a whisper. It was almost like she was talking to herself. "Just a few more hours. You can make it." The words hit Anthony like a stone. She was fighting an invisible battle, counting the minutes until freedom. But she didn't know that freedom and justice were already walking the aisles, watching her every move. Brent's voice suddenly echoed again from the far end of the store. "Maria." "My office? Now?" Her head snapped up. She wiped her eyes quickly, fixed her uniform, and walked toward the back. Anthony followed at a distance, his steps silent. Something told him this was the moment he had been waiting for, because whatever happened next would be the beginning of the end for Brent and the start of a new chapter for Maria. Maria stepped into the back office, the door swinging shut behind her. The room was small, with a single desk, filing cabinets, and a faint smell of coffee. Brent stood behind the desk, arms folded, eyes sharp. Anthony slipped in quietly before. The door closed completely, leaning against the wall as if he had every right to be there. Maria hesitated, unsure why she had been called in. Her injured wrist ached, but she kept her posture straight. Brent tapped the desk with his fingers. "You've been too slow today." Customers complained. "I can't have that," he said in a flat, cold tone. Maria opened her mouth to respond, but he raised a hand, cutting her off. "You're on your final warning, Maria. One more slip, and you're out." Anthony's eyes narrowed. He had been silent for long enough. "Funny," he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge. Brent turned to him sharply. "This is a private conversation. Get out before I have security throw you out." Maria looked from Brent to Anthony, confusion written on her face. She didn't know who this man in old clothes really was, but there was something in his voice, a quiet authority that didn't match his worn-out coat. Anthony stepped forward slowly, placing his small shopping basket on the desk. Inside were the few items he had picked up earlier: bread, milk, fruit. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. From it, he slid out a gold-embossed ID card, the kind only senior executives in the company possessed. The card bore the name Anthony Cole and the title owner. Brent's smirk faltered for the first time that day. Maria blinked, her eyes widening. Anthony placed the card on the desk gently. "I own this store," he said simply, "and several others in this city." The room felt suddenly smaller. Brent's mouth opened, then closed again. That's impossible. You're dressed like someone you wouldn't respect," Anthony finished for him. "That's the point." Maria stared at Anthony as if trying to process what was happening. Her heartbeat raced. She had endured the worst day of her job, and now she was standing next to the man who could change everything with a single word. Anthony's voice stayed calm, but there was steel beneath it. "I've been here since morning. I've watched every interaction. I've seen how you speak to staff, how you treat customers." He glanced at Maria, then back at Brent. "And I've seen how you target her again and again without cause." Brent took a step back. "Look, Mr. Cole, you've got it all wrong." Anthony raised a hand. "Don't," he said, his tone final. "I don't need excuses. I have witnesses. Customers saw it. Employees saw it. And I saw it." Maria swallowed hard, her eyes darting between them for the first time in months. She felt a flicker of hope. Anthony turned to her, his voice softening. "Maria, you've been nothing but professional all day. You've kept working despite everything thrown at you. That's the kind of employee any owner should be proud to have." Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Thank you, sir." Anthony faced Brent again. "You're done here." Effective immediately, Brent's face flushed red. "You can't fire me without—" "I just did," Anthony interrupted. He picked up the office phone and dialed a number. Within seconds, a voice on the other end confirmed security was on the way. Maria's eyes widened as two security guards appeared at the door. Brent tried to protest. "This is a mistake." Anthony's gaze was steady. "The only mistake was leaving you in charge for this long." The guards stepped forward. Brent grabbed his jacket, glaring at Maria as if she had caused all this. But Maria didn't flinch this time. She stood tall, her chin lifted, for once. She wasn't the one feeling small. As Brent was escorted out, Anthony turned to Maria. The tension in the room seemed to melt, replaced by something warmer. "You're not just keeping your job, Maria. You're getting a promotion," he said. Her hand flew to her mouth in shock. "A promotion?" "Yes, you've earned it. And a raise. Effective today." Her eyes filled with tears, but these were different from the ones she had fought earlier. These were tears of relief, of finally being seen. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Just keep doing what you've been doing." Anthony replied with a small smile. "Except now, no one will be standing over you, trying to break you down." Maria nodded, still in disbelief. She glanced at the ID card on the desk, then back at Anthony. She realized that the man in old clothes hadn't been just a customer. He had been her silent protector all along. And now, the whole store was about to find out. The moment Brent stepped out of the office with security flanking him, the sound of whispers began to ripple through the store. Customers slowed their shopping. Employees paused mid-task, their eyes following the unusual scene. It wasn't every day that the store's manager was escorted out in the middle of his shift. Anthony walked out behind them, Maria at his side. Her steps were hesitant at first. She had never been in the center of so much attention. But Anthony's calm presence gave her courage. He didn't rush her. He wanted the entire store to witness what was about to happen. Brent's voice echoed through the aisles. "Desperate now? This is ridiculous. I've been running this place for years. You can't do this without the owners." Anthony raised his voice, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I am the owner." The store went quiet. Even the background music seemed to fade. Eyes widened. Heads turned, and a few customers gasped. Anthony's old brown coat and worn shoes suddenly looked different to them. No longer a sign of poverty, but a disguise that had fooled them all. Anthony stopped in the center of the store, his voice steady and clear. "My name is Anthony Cole. I own this store, and I've owned it for over a decade. Today, I came here dressed like any other customer. To see how things really work when no one knows I'm watching." He turned slightly, gesturing toward Maria. "And what I saw was unacceptable." Maria froze, unsure what he would say next. Her heart pounded in her chest. Anthony continued, "This young woman has worked tirelessly all day. She has treated every customer with kindness and respect. She has done her job better than most could, even while being insulted and humiliated by her own manager." A murmur of agreement rose from the crowd. One woman called out, "I saw it." She was doing great. He kept bothering her. Another customer added, "She's the reason I shop here. She's always polite." Anthony nodded. Exactly. And no employee should ever be treated the way Maria was treated today. He turned to Brent, who stood stiffly between the two guards. "You didn't just fail as a manager. You failed as a human being. This is your last day here. Effective immediately. You are banned from this store and every store I own." Brent's face turned pale. "You can't just—" "I can," Anthony said firmly. "And I just did." The guards began walking Brent toward the exit. Customers stepped aside, some shaking their heads in disgust, others openly glaring at him. A few even clapped quietly as he passed. Brent muttered under his breath, but no one cared anymore. When the doors closed behind him, Anthony turned back. To Maria, her eyes were wide, her mouth slightly open. "Maria," Anthony said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "as of today, you are promoted to head cashier." With a pay raise and full benefits, gasps and smiles spread through the crowd. A few customers clapped louder this time. Maria's hands flew to her mouth and tears spilled over. She tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. Anthony placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've earned this, not because of today, but because of every day you've shown up and done your job with integrity." Even when no one was watching, the other employees began to step forward. A young man from the produce section smiled. "Congratulations, Maria. You deserve it." An older woman from the bakery wiped her eyes. It's about time someone stood up for her. Maria took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Thank you, sir." She managed to say, I didn't think anyone would ever care enough to stop him." Anthony's gaze was steady. "Good people always matter, Maria. And when I see one in my store, I make sure they know it." He turned back to the customers and staff. "This store will run differently from now on. Respect will be the rule, not the exception. And if anyone here thinks they can get away with treating people like they're less than human, they should consider this their warning." The statement hung in the air, strong and undeniable. Maria wiped her cheeks and straightened her uniform. Her tears were no longer from humiliation. They were from relief, from the sudden weight that had been lifted off her shoulders as the store returned to normal. Customers approached her. "Register with warm smiles," one man said. "You keep that candy the customer gave you earlier." With a wink, Maria laughed softly, feeling lighter than she had in months. Anthony stood at a distance now, watching quietly. He didn't need applause or gratitude. Seeing Maria smile was enough, but deep inside, he knew this was more than just a store matter. It was a reminder that leadership meant protecting the people who kept the business alive, and today, justice had been served. The store felt different the next morning. It wasn't just the brighter lights or the fresh display of flowers near the entrance. It was the atmosphere. The air no longer carried the heavy tension of yesterday. Employees moved with lighter steps. Voices carried friendly tones instead of cautious whispers. Maria stood at the front of the store, her new NAMA tag gleaming, head cashier. She still couldn't believe it. Just yesterday, she had been bracing herself for another day of silent endurance. Now she was leading her team. Her wrist was still sore, but her spirit felt stronger than ever. Anthony had stopped by early, quietly. As always, still in his simple old clothes, Maria spotted him near the entrance. Holding a small paper cup of coffee, she walked over, her smile genuine. "Good morning, sir," she greeted. "Good morning, Maria," he replied, his eyes warm, but still carrying that quiet authority, everything running smoothly. "Yes, sir." "Everyone's been different, kinder," she said. Glancing around, Anthony chuckled softly. "Sometimes just takes one reminder that respect is non-negotiable." She hesitated before speaking again. "I never got to thank you properly," she said, her voice low so others wouldn't overhear. "You didn't just save my job. You made me feel like I matter." Anthony's gaze was steady. "You've always mattered." Maria, yesterday, just made sure everyone else knew it too. As the morning rush began, Maria moved to her register. This time, instead of dread, she felt pride as she put on her headset and began organizing her station. Customers greeted her with smiles and kind words. Some mentioned they had heard what happened. One elderly man leaned in and whispered, "We need more people like you in the world." Before handing her a small chocolate, she laughed softly and placed it in her pocket, this time without fear. Across the store, Anthony observed quietly. He wasn't here to interfere, only to see how the changes were settling in. The staff seemed more confident. The assistant manager, now acting manager, treated employees with visible respect. Even customers seemed to sense the shift. It was proof that leadership's tone trickled down to every corner of the business. At one point, a new cashier struggled with a long line. Maria noticed and stepped over without hesitation. "Take a deep breath. I'll help you with these," she said, scanning items quickly while chatting warmly with the customers. Anthony watched the way she handled the situation. No sharp words, no condescension, just calm guidance. It was the exact opposite of what Brent would have done, and it worked. The line moved smoothly again, and the new cashier gave Maria a grateful smile. Later that afternoon, Anthony approached her counter one last time. He placed a small envelope in front of her. "What's this?" she asked, tilting her head. "Your official promotion letter," he said. She opened it, her eyes scanning the neat typeface confirmation of her new role. Salary increase and benefits, but tucked inside was also a handwritten note from Anthony, "Keep leading with kindness. That's worth more than any title." Maria blinked back fresh tears. "I won't let you down, sir," she said, her voice steady this time. "I know you won't," he replied, as he turned to leave. Maria called out softly, "Sir, why me? Why did you care so much?" Anthony paused at the door, looking back over his shoulder. "Because I know what it's like to work hard and be invisible. Someone once gave me a chance when no one else would. Now it's my turn to do the same." The bell above the door chimed as he stepped outside, blending back into the city crowd. Maria watched him go, a quiet smile on her face. She knew he might never tell anyone the full story of why he had come to the store in disguise that day. But she didn't need the details. She knew the truth where it mattered. From that day on, the store became a place people wanted to work. Staff supported one another, customers felt welcome, and Maria's register became the spot where regulars would line up just to say hello. The memory of Brent's reign faded quickly, replaced by a new standard, one built on respect, fairness, and kindness. And whenever Maria faced a challenge, she remembered the man in old clothes, the one who had watched quietly, stepped in at the right moment, and reminded her that good people always matter. It was the start of her new beginning, and she intended to make every day count.